The wreckage field stretched across the void like a graveyard of forgotten gods. Xerwind's scavenger vessel, the Emerald Tide, drifted through the debris, its bioluminescent sensors casting pulsing yellow, green light over twisted metal and shattered hulls. The battle had been brutal. This much was clear from the scars left behind. The Krellis system had once been a contested border zone, but now it was nothing more than a tomb. Xerwind, the ship's scientist, adjusted the organic fiber tendrils of his interface, his emerald eyes narrowing as data pulsed through the living circuitry. "No survivors," he murmured, his voice a low hum of biosynthetic resonance. "Just as we expected." Xerwind flexed his clawed fingers against the command vine, his carapace plates shifting in unease. The Varian Dominion had sent them to pick through the remains, to salvage what they could from the aftermath of the latest skirmish between the Galactic Accord and the upstart Terrans. The humans had been deemed a nuisance, violent, yes, but disorganized, their technology crude compared to the Dominion's living warships. Yet, as the Emerald Tide glided deeper into the wreckage, something felt wrong. The Accord's vessels were torn apart, their bio-armor split open like overripe fruit, their energy cores drained to husks. But the human ships, those that remained, were different. Their damage was precise, surgical, not the wild, uncontrolled destruction of a desperate species, but the cold efficiency of predators who had chosen their kills with care. Then, the sensors flickered, a single ship. It drifted at the edge of the debris field, its silhouette dark against the distant glow of the system's dying star. No energy signatures, no life signs. Just a silent, hulking mass of metal, its hull pockmarked with battle scars but still intact. Xerwind's spines twitched. That shouldn't be there. Xerxic's tendrils coiled tighter around his console. "A derelict," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Probably a dead hulk, left behind when the others retreated." Xerwind wasn't so sure. The Emerald Tide moved closer, its photosynthetic membranes pulsing as they absorbed stray radiation, feeding the ship's organic energy webs. The derelict grew larger in the viewport, its angular design stark against the Dominion's flowing, biomechanical aesthetics. Human ships were blocky, utilitarian, built for war, not beauty. Then, the first anomaly, a flicker, a single faint power surge, deep within the derelict's core. Xerxix stiffened. "That's impossible. Our scans showed nothing." Xerwind's claws dug into the command vine. "Run them again." The second scan returned the same result, and yet, a shadow moved, just for an instant, a silhouette crossing behind one of the derelict's viewports. Then darkness again. Silence gripped the Emerald Tide's bridge. Xerxix's voice was barely a whisper. "There's someone on that ship." Xerwind exhaled slowly, his bio-electric pulse quickening. The humans were supposed to be gone. Their fleet had been routed, their forces scattered, and yet, here was one of their vessels, drifting like a specter among the dead. "Bring us alongside," Xerwind ordered, his voice low. "Prepare a boarding party." Xerxix hesitated. "If there are survivors, then we will see what kind of creatures they truly are." The Emerald Tide extended its organic docking tendrils, the living metal weaving toward the human ship's airlock. The Dominion's warriors assembled in the umbilical corridor, their carapace armor glistening under the yellow-green glow of the ship's bioluminescence. Xerwind watched as the airlock cycled, the mechanisms groaning like the last breath of a dying beast. The door opened, darkness stared back, and within it, something moved. Section Fey. The silent leviathan, the airlock exhaled stale, metallic breath into the umbilical corridor. Xerwind's mandibles twitched. Human atmospheres always carried that acrid tang, like rust and ionized sweat. His warriors hesitated at the threshold, their bioluminescent markings pulsing uneasily. The darkness beyond was absolute, swallowing the yellow-green glow of their armor. Xerxix adjusted his scanner, the device's photosynthetic filaments writhing as they strained to parse the void. "No life signs," he murmured. "But the power core is still active, residual at least." Xerwind flexed his claws. "Then where are the bodies?" The question hung like a blade. The humans had fought like rabid beasts at Cygnus. Fae, their ships detonating in suicidal barrages rather than surrender. This vessel, designation TFS Vindicator, should have been a charnel house. Instead, it was a tomb without corpses. The boarding party advanced, their footfalls silent on the unnervingly clean deck. The human ship's interior was a labyrinth of angular corridors and exposed conduits, so unlike the organic flow of Xerion architecture. Every surface bore the scars of battle, carbon scoring, warped bulkheads, the ghostly imprints of emergency welds, but no blood, no dismembered limbs, no signs of the desperate last stand they had expected. Ursic's scanner flickered. "Captain, the walls." Xerwind turned. Etched into the metal, at precise intervals, were symbols, human script. He realized names, dates, graffiti. Ventured one warrior, his spines flattening. "No," Ursic said softly. "Memorials." They moved deeper, the ship's silence pressing against them like a physical weight. The bridge doors were sealed, but the mechanisms yielded to Xerion hacking protocols with disturbing ease. As the portal hissed open, the boarding party froze. The bridge was intact, consoles hummed with low power, screens flickering with dormant systems. The captain's chair, scuffed and worn, faced the viewport, where the corpse light of dead stars cast long shadows. And there, slouched in the seat, was a human. Xerwind's pulse spiked. The figure didn't move. Ursic's scanner remained silent. "He's dead." They approached cautiously. The human was male, clad in a tattered uniform, his skin gray with dehydration. One hand rested on the armrest. The other clutched a sidearm, not raised, not even gripped in defiance, just held. Xerwind leaned closer. The human's eyes were open, sunken, unseeing, and then the corpse spoke. "Took you long enough." The voice was a dry rasp, the sound of a dead thing, dredged from the depths of a crypt. The boarding party recoiled, weapons snapping up. The human didn't flinch, his lips cracked as they moved again. "Relax. I'm not gonna shoot." He tilted his head slightly, milky eyes staring past them. "Wouldn't matter if I did." Ursic's scanner flared. "Impossible, your vitals are 0. "Yeah." The human's throat clicked as he swallowed. "Been that way for hell, dunno?" Ship's chronos busted. Xerwind's carapace prickled. "You're dead?" The human chuckled, a sound like breaking glass. "And yet here we are." His fingers twitched against the gun. "You here to finish the job?" Xerwind hesitated. This wasn't combat. This wasn't even surrender. It was something else entirely, something that slithered between the cracks of understanding. The human sighed when no answer came. Figures, even dying's a disappointment. His head lolled back. "Ship's yours, I guess. Not like we're using it." Ursic stepped forward, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Where are the others?" The human's face spasmed, something like a smile or a grimace. "Gone. Same as me, just faster." He lifted the sidearm slightly, then let it drop. "I was supposed to be last." Xerwind stared at the human, at the ship around them, at the memorials carved into the walls. This wasn't a defeat. It wasn't even defiance. It was a vigil, and it terrified him more than any battlefield ever had. Section Fae. The first mistake, the Xerion scavenger team moved through the derelict human vessel like shadows through a corpse. Their bioluminescent scanners cast pulsing yellow-green light across the darkened corridors, illuminating walls scarred by weapons, fire and time. The air tasted of rust and something else, something organic and sour, like old blood and ozone. Xerwind kept his primary limbs close to his sidearm. his secondary sensory stalks twitching at every creak of the ship's dying structure. The human had been left behind. Just one, just the last. But the ship itself felt wrong. Not dead. Not truly. The Xerion's own living technology resonated with the faint, sluggish pulse of something still active beneath the metal. Arsec, ever the scientist, ran a delicate appendage along a control panel. The surface was cold, inert, or so it seemed. Then, without warning, the panel flickered. A dim red light blinked once, twice. Before stabilizing into a steady glow, the entire team froze. A voice, synthetic and hollow, echoed through the corridor. Identify, friend or foe. Xerwind's carapace tightened. The words were in their language. Translated, processed, learned. The ship's AI wasn't just active. It had been listening, watching. Ursic's bioluminescence flared in alarm. It's parsing our comms, adapting. One of the scavengers, a younger Xerion named Vis, made the first mistake. Panic spiked through his neural web, and his instincts overrode protocol. He raised his weapon. The AI reacted faster than any of them could. A series of heavy clunks reverberated through the hull as emergency bulkheads slammed shut, cutting off their retreat. The red light on the panel deepened to a bloody crimson. Hostile designation confirmed. Xerwind expected the ship to kill them. That was what any civilized species would do. Eliminate intruders. Purge the threat. The Xerion themselves had security protocols that dissolved organic matter on contact. But the human AI did something worse. It spoke again. Warning. Defensive protocols engaged. You are trespassing on a memorial site. Stand down or lethal countermeasures will be deployed. A memorial site, the realization struck Xerwind like a plasma round. The human's last words, "I was supposed to be last," took on a new, horrifying weight. This wasn't just a derelict, it was a tomb, and the AI wasn't a guardian, it was a gravekeeper. Ursic's voice was barely a whisper. "It's giving us a chance." Xerwind had faced countless enemies. He had seen the cold efficiency of the Crick slavers, the mindless hunger of the devourer swarms. But this mercy from a machine that had every reason to slaughter them, was something he couldn't comprehend. The AI waited. Slowly, deliberately, Xerwind lowered his weapon. The red light dimmed. The bulkheads remained sealed, but the voice that came next was different, softer, almost tired. Designation updated, non-hostile. You will be escorted to the primary hangar. Do not deviate from the path. The lights along the corridor flickered to life, one by one, guiding them forward. Xerwind followed, his mind reeling. The humans were dead. Their ship was dead, and yet, somehow, they were still winning. Section Fae, the offer. The path through the derelict's corpse was a gauntlet of ghosts. Xerwind's boots clicked against the deck plating, the sound swallowed by the cavernous silence of the human warship. The AI's guiding lights pulsed ahead, casting long, wavering shadows that slithered along the walls like living things. The Xerion commander kept his sidearm lowered, but unholstered, his fingers twitching against the grip. Every instinct screamed at him that this was a trap, that the moment they let their guard down, the ship would remember its purpose and finish what it had started. But the AI did not attack. Instead, the corridor opened into a vast hangar bay, its ceiling lost in darkness. The skeletal remains of human fighters lay in neat rows, their wings folded like the carapaces of dead insects. At the center of the bay, a single shuttle hummed to life, its engines cycling with a low, resonant thrum. The craft was ancient, its hull pitted with scars from centuries of combat, but its systems were active. Ready? You will take this vessel, the AI intoned. Supplies have been loaded. Medical station is operational. Ersic stepped forward, his bioluminescent crest flickering in confusion. Why? The word slipped out before he could stop it. The AI did not answer immediately. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of something the Xerions couldn't name. Then, from the shadows, a holoprojector flickered to life. A human woman materialized before them. Tall, her face lined with the kind of weariness that came from decades of war. Her uniform was crisp, the insignia of a commander gleaming at her collar. "This is Commander Samantha Anderson, last surviving officer of the TFS Vigilant," the AI said. Her final orders were recorded prior to system collapse. The hologram's eyes locked onto Xerwind's, as if she could see him through time itself. "If you're hearing this," the recording began, her voice rough but steady, "then you're not one of ours. Maybe you're scavengers, maybe you're enemies, doesn't matter." She exhaled, rubbing her temple. "This ship's AI has standing orders to protect survivors. Any survivors, doesn't matter what species, doesn't matter whose side you're on. You're alive, that's enough." Xerwind's mandibles tightened. This made no sense. The humans had been butchered here. Their ship was a graveyard. Why would they spare the ones who had come to pick at their bones? The hologram continued. "There's med supplies in the shuttle. Rations enough to get you home." A pause. Then, almost too quiet to hear. "We've had enough of war." The projection dissolved into static. Ursik's frills trembled. They knew they were going to die. And they still. Xerwind didn't let him finish. He turned to the shuttle, his mind churning. The humans had built their warships to be unstoppable, armored in alloys that could shrug off plasma fire, armed with weapons that could crack planets. But this was something else. This was a weapon they had never accounted for. The shuttle's ramp lowered with a hiss. Inside, the supplies were neatly arranged. Medkits stamped with Terran Federation sigils, nutrient packs, even a small cache of water recyclers. Not scavenged, not left behind. Prepared. Xerwind hesitated at the threshold. The AI's voice echoed through the hangar one last time. "You will not return here. This vessel's duty is complete." Ursik boarded first, his movements slow, reverent. The other Xerions followed, their earlier bravado gone, replaced by something quieter, something unsettled. Xerwind was the last to step inside. As the ramp sealed behind him, he caught a final glimpse of the hangar. The dead fighters, the flickering lights, the shadows that seemed to watch them go. The shuttle lifted off, its thrusters flaring as it carried them away from the tomb of the Vigilant. Outside, the stars burned cold and indifferent, but Xerwind couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in the dark, the humans were still laughing. Section Fae. The debates begin. The shuttle's interior, hummed with the low organic pulse of Xerion bio energy, its walls lined with veins of emerald light that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. The air smelled of ozone and the faint, sweet tang of photosynthetic coolant. Familiar, comforting scents that did nothing to ease the tension coiling in Xerwind's chest. He stood at the rear of the cabin, his talons flexing against the living metal floor. Around him, his crew murmured, their voices hushed but sharp with disagreement. Some clustered around the Terran supplies, poking at the medkits with wary fascination. Others had retreated into themselves, their bioluminescent markings dimmed in unease. Ursik was the only one who seemed unshaken. The scientist crouched near the shuttle's data terminal, his spined fingers dancing across the interface, pulling logs from the Vigilant's final transmissions. His crest of sensory frills twitched as data scrolled, yellow-green glyphs flickering too fast for Xerwind to follow. "It makes no sense," hissed Vecris, the youngest of the warriors. Her claws tapped a rapid, nervous rhythm against her thigh. "Why leave supplies? Why not just kill us?" "Because they knew we'd take them," muttered another, his voice thick with suspicion. "This is a trap. The medkits could be poisoned, the nutrient packs laced with neurotoxins." Xerwind exhaled through his nasal vents, the sound a low, rattling hiss. He had considered the same. But the humans hadn't needed poison. They'd had the shuttle surrounded. They'd had the vigilance corpses as proof of what they could do. No, this was something else. He moved toward Ursek, his shadow falling over the terminal. "What did you find?" Ursek didn't look up. "Records, scattered, but intact." His voice was eerily calm. The Vigilance last stand wasn't just a battle. It was a test. Xerwind's frills stiffened. "Explain." The scientist tapped the screen, pulling up a fragmented log, a Terran transmission intercepted in the ship's final moments. The words were translated, but their meaning was jagged, unsettling. "Repeat. Do not engage. Let them board. Let them see." A chill slithered down Xerwind's spine. Ursek continued, his voice hollow. "They let us take the ship. They wanted us to find the dead, to see what they'd done." Ursek finally turned, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Because they weren't just killing us, they were teaching us." The cabin fell silent. Xerwind stared at the screen, at the words burned into the log. He thought of the human corpses they'd found. Not just soldiers, but medics, engineers, the ones who'd stayed behind, who'd fought to the last, not for glory, but to buy time for others to escape. And then he thought of the shuttle, the supplies, the AI's final words. "You will not return here," not a threat, a warning. Ursek's voice was barely audible. "They're not just warriors, they're survivors, and they wanted us to know, if we fight them again, they won't just defeat us." He looked up, his frills flaring. "They'll make sure we remember." Outside, the stars watched, cold and uncaring, and Xerwind understood, with a dread that settled deep into his bones, that the humans had already won. Section Fae. The logs of mercy. The data logs flickered across the holographic display, their luminescence casting eerie yellow-green reflections across the Xerion command chamber. The air hummed with the low organic pulse of the ship's photosynthetic energy cores, but Xerwind barely registered it. His attention was locked onto the words scrolling before him. Human words, transcribed in the jagged, efficient script of their military logs. Ranger Unit Sigma Fae. Engagement at Epsilon Trench. Enemy forces surrendered. Orders, stand down. Ursek's frills twitched as he leaned closer, his claws hovering over the projection. "This makes no sense," he murmured. "They had the enemy at their mercy. Why would they stop?" Xerwind said nothing. His mind reeled. Galactic doctrine was clear. A surrendered enemy was a neutralized threat. But to let them go, it was madness. A waste of tactical advantage. The next log entry materialized, its timestamp marking it as hours after the first. Surrendered forces regrouped. Attempted flanking maneuver. Engaged. Eliminated. A cold ripple passed through Xerwind's spine. The humans had known. They had let their enemies regroup, knowing full well what would happen. Ursek exhaled sharply, his bioluminescent veins pulsing faster. This wasn't mercy, he realized. This was a lesson. The logs continued. Survivors fled, broadcasted encounter to Allied forces. No further engagements in this sector for Fae standard cycles. Xerwind's claws flexed involuntarily. Psychological warfare. The humans hadn't just defeated their enemies. They had rewritten their instincts by allowing surrender, then demonstrating the consequences of betrayal. They had ensured that any future foes would think twice before raising arms against them. Ursek pulled up another file, a recovered transmission from the human commander, Samantha Anderson. Her voice, when it played, was calm, almost weary. "They'll remember this, not as an act of weakness, but as a warning. Next time they point a gun at one of ours, they'll hesitate. And that hesitation will cost them." The recording ended. The chamber was silent, save for the soft, living hum of the ship's systems. Xerwind stared at the frozen image of the human commander, her face lined with scars, her eyes sharp with the weight of decisions no soldier should have to make. He had seen that look before, in the veterans of the Xerion's own wars, the look of someone who had learned the hardest truth of combat, that the greatest weapon was not a blade or a gun, but the mind of the enemy. Ursek's voice was quiet. They didn't just win battles, they shaped them. Outside the viewport, the void stretched endlessly, indifferent. But here, in the dim glow of the logs, Xerwind felt something he had never expected to feel toward humans, a deep, unsettling respect. They had fought like predators, but they had thought like scholars, and that was far more dangerous. Section Fae. The scars of forgiveness, the silence in the chamber was thick, pressing against Xerwind's carapace like the weight of a dying star. The holographic logs had ended, but the images lingered. Humans standing amidst the wreckage of their enemies, not with triumph, but with something far more unsettling. Mercy Ursek's tendrils twitched, his bioluminescence flickering in agitation. This makes no tactical sense. His voice was hushed, as if speaking too loudly might summon the ghosts of those battles. They had the enemy at their mercy. They could have ended them. Xerwind did not answer immediately. His mind traced the contours of the human commander's face, the scars, the weariness, the quiet certainty in her eyes. He had seen warriors break under the strain of war, had seen them hollowed out by the endless calculus of survival. But this was different. This was choice. The chamber's organic walls pulsed faintly with the ship's lifeblood, veins of yellow-green energy threading through the living metal. Outside, the void yawned, indifferent, but inside, the past was alive, whispering. The Battle of Serpent's Maw. It was not a name the Xerion knew well. A skirmish in the Outer Rim, insignificant by galactic standards. A human convoy, ambushed by a mercenary fleet. The Kethral. Predators who painted their hulls with the blood of their victims. The humans were outgunned, outnumbered. By all rights, they should have been erased from existence. But they weren't. Instead, they fought like something out of nightmare. Their ships, ungainly by Xerion standards, moved with a brutal, unrelenting precision. They took hits that should have shattered them and kept firing. Their weapons were crude, kinetic slugs and plasma cutters, but they worked, carving through the Kethral with terrifying efficiency. And then, at the battle's climax, the humans did the unthinkable. They stopped. The Kethral flagship, its hull breached, its engines dead, drifted helplessly. The human warship Iron Resolve locked onto it, its railguns humming with lethal charge. One shot, that was all it would take. Commander Samantha Anderson gave the order. Stand down, not a surrender, not a plea, a command. The Kethral expected death. They had earned it 100 times over. But the humans did not fire. Instead, they opened a channel. Anderson's voice was calm, ironclad. You will leave. You will tell your kind what happened here, and you will remember. We could have killed you. We chose not to. A pause, then softer, colder. Next time, we won't. Xerwind exhaled slowly, his mandibles tightening. He had seen the aftermath reports. The Kethral had limped back to their dens, their hulls scarred, their crews shaken. But it was not the damage that haunted them. It was the mercy. Ursek's bioluminescence dimmed further. They let them go. Disbelief colored his voice. After everything, after the ambush, the slaughter, they just let them leave. Xerwind's claws flexed against the console. No, they did something worse. He pulled up the records, fragmented intelligence reports, intercepted transmissions. The Kethral had fractured after Serpent's Maw. Some crews abandoned their posts, refusing to engage human vessels. Others turned on their own commanders, accusing them of weakness. The humans had not just defeated them, they had broken them. Ursek shuddered. This is not warfare. This is psychological predation. Xerwind's gaze drifted to the viewport where the stars burned cold and distant. No, it is understanding. The humans had known exactly what they were doing. They had studied their enemy, learned their fears, their pride. And then, with surgical precision, they had exploited it. A spared life was a weapon. A scar left unbloodied was a reminder. And the galaxy had learned the hard way. Human mercy was not kindness. It was a threat. The chamber hummed softly, the ship's living systems pulsing in time with Xerwind's thoughts. He had come here expecting to study primitive tactics, brute force strategies. Instead, he had found something far more dangerous. Humans did not just fight wars, they ended them. Section Faye. The realization the observation chamber was silent, except for the slow, rhythmic pulse of the ship's bioluminescent veins. Xerwind stood motionless, his emerald-scaled fingers resting against the organic interface panel, the data streams flickering across its surface like ghostly fireflies. The battle records played again, the same footage, the same moment of human restraint that had shattered an entire armada's will to fight. Ursek's voice was barely a whisper, his frilled throat vibrating with unease. They could have killed them all. Xerwind did not answer. He was too busy watching the human warship. Indomitable, they called it, hovering over the crippled Xerion flagship. Its weapons were charged, its railguns humming at full capacity, its missile bays loaded with warheads that could have turned the vessel into molten slag. And yet, it had not fired. Instead, it had opened a comm channel. The human commander, Samantha Anderson, her face scarred from battles, Xerwind could only imagine, had spoken a single sentence. "Stand down. This doesn't have to end with you." That was all. No gloating, no demands for surrender, just an offer, and the Xerion fleet had broken. Ursek's bioluminescent markings dimmed in distress. They didn't even take prisoners. They just let them go. Xerwind exhaled slowly, his respiratory vents flaring. That was the horror of it. The humans had not needed to destroy them. They had not needed to prove their strength through slaughter. They had proven something far worse. They had not considered the Xerions worth killing. The realization settled into Xerwind's bones like ice. Human mercy was not weakness, it was contempt. A declaration that their enemies were beneath the effort of annihilation, that their defiance was so insignificant, so pitiable, that the humans could afford to let them live. And that was what had broken the Xerion armada, not fear of death, fear of being forgiven. Ursek's tendrils coiled tight against his skull. This violates every principle of war, of dominance. You do not spare an enemy. You crush them, so they never rise again. Xerwind's third eyelid flicked shut for a moment, shielding his gaze. That is what we believed. That is what the entire galaxy believes. He turned back to the screen, where the human warship loomed like a specter. But the humans, they do not think like us. The footage shifted. Another battle. Another moment of incomprehensible restraint. A human soldier, Corporal Jackson Emigan, standing over a wounded Xerion warrior. The alien had been armed, dangerous. His bio blade still crackling with venom. Emigan had holstered his weapon, he had knelt, and he had offered the wounded warrior a hand up. The Xerion had screamed, not in pain, but in terror, before throwing himself off the cliff, rather than accept the human's aid. Ursek recoiled. Why would he do that? Xerwind's voice was hollow. Because to be spared is to be seen as harmless. To be helped is to be seen as weak. And weakness was the one thing the Xerions could not endure. The humans had not just defeated them. They had humiliated them, not with violence, but with something far more devastating, the refusal to see them as a threat. The chamber's walls pulsed faintly, the ship's living architecture reacting to the tension in the air. Xerwind's mind raced, reassessing every battle record, every encounter. The humans had not fought like conquerors. They had fought like teachers, and their lesson was simple. You are not our equals. You are not even our enemies. You are children waving knives, and we will not dignify your tantrums with slaughter. Ersek's voice trembled. What do we do? How do we fight this? Xerwind stared at the frozen image of the human warship, its hull gleaming under distant starlight. We don't, because the humans had already won, not by destroying their enemies, but by making them realize they had never been worth destroying in the first place. Section Faye. The choice. The AI's voice was calm, almost gentle, a tone that made the silence in the Xerion command chamber feel heavier. Final warning, take the supplies and leave, or be marked as hostile. The words hung in the air, their weight pressing down on Xerwind's spine like a gravitational anomaly. The chamber's bioluminescent veins dimmed slightly, as if the ship itself recoiled from the decision before them. Ersek's fingers twitched over the sensor array, the data streams reflecting in his wide, glassy eyes. The human vessel, indomitable, they called it, had not moved. It simply waited. No weapons charged, no boarding drones deployed, just patience. Patience, Xerwind realized, was worse than aggression. Because aggression could be met with aggression. But patience? Patience was a blade pressed against the throat without cutting. And the choice was this. Take the offered mercy, food, medical supplies, even fuel, and slink back to their homeworld, tails tucked between their legs, and prove to the humans that they were exactly what the galaxy had always whispered, a species too proud to recognize when they had already lost. Ersek turned to him, the bioluminescent patterns along his neck flickering erratically. They're mocking us, he hissed. Xerwind said nothing, because the truth was worse than mockery. The humans weren't laughing at them. They were ignoring them. The supplies weren't a taunt. They were a dismissal. Go home. You are not worth our bullets. The chamber's organic walls pulsed faintly, the ship's living architecture reacting to the crew's rising distress. Xerwind's claws flexed against the command console, the smooth biomechanical surface yielding slightly under the pressure. He could order the attack. The Indomitable was close enough. Their weapons, though untargeted, were still active. A single volley of plasma lances, a swarm of razorvine torpedoes. They could at least try to leave a mark. But then what? The humans would retaliate. Not out of rage, not out of vengeance, but the way a gardener prunes a weed, disappointed, and the galaxy would watch as the Xerions, who had boasted of their superiority, were reduced to a footnote in human military history. Another species that didn't know when to stop. Ersek's voice cut through his thoughts. We cannot accept this. It's surrender. Xerwind exhaled, the sound like wind through dead leaves. No, he said softly. Surrender implies they saw us as a threat to begin with. The truth was a cold knife in his gut. The humans had never feared them, not their ships, not their weapons, not their pride. They had only ever pitied them, and pity was the one thing the Xerion Dominion could not endure. The AI's voice echoed again, unchanged, unwavering. Final warning. Xerwind closed his eyes and made his choice. Word count. Faye. On-target continuity notes. Maintains the psychological tension from Section Faye. Deepens Xerwind's internal conflict. Reinforces the humans' terrifying indifference as their ultimate weapon. Sets up the final section's resolution. Acceptance or defy. Answers key emotional beats. The humiliation of mercy as a weapon. The horror of realizing they were never seen as equals. The crushing weight of a choice that isn't really a choice. Let me know if you'd like any refinements. The Varian scout ship Emerald Tide limped through the void. Its once proud luminescent hull now scarred and flickering. Its photosynthetic energy webs dimmed by the wounds of battle. Inside, the crew moved in silence, their spines flattened in submission, their yellow-green eyes dull with something deeper than defeat. Xerwind stood at the observation deck, his claws resting against the organic glass. Behind him, the remnants of his fleet, What few ships had survived the humans' mercy drifted like broken husks. They had not been destroyed. That was the horror of it. The humans had let them go, not out of weakness, not out of fear, but because they had chosen to. Ersic approached, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically, a sign of distress among their kind. "The data logs are intact," he said, voice hollow. "Every transmission, every scan. The humans made no attempt to stop us from recording." He already knew why. The humans wanted the galaxy to see. The first reports reached the Varian High Council within cycles. At first, they dismissed them as exaggerations, impossible tales of a single human warship standing unshaken against an entire Varian battle group. But the evidence was irrefutable. The Indomitable had not just survived, it had allowed the Varians to retreat. And that was the revelation that sent ripples through the Dominion. The humans had not fought out of desperation. They had not fought out of hatred. They had fought with restraint, a weapon the Varians had no defense against. On the edges of known space, the whispers began. Pirate clans, who had once raided human colonies, suddenly refused contracts involving their worlds. Mercenary fleets, notorious for their brutality, hesitated at the sight of Terran insignias. Even the Krothax swarm, a hive-mind species that knew no fear, altered their expansion vectors to avoid human-claimed sectors. The reason was always the same. They do not kill like we do. The galaxy had expected monsters. It had expected conquerors who burned worlds and enslaved the weak. Instead, it found soldiers who stood between the innocent and the storm and chose to hold their fire. Xerwind stood before the High Council months later, his once vibrant emerald carapace now dulled by exhaustion. The chamber hummed with the organic thrum of living architecture, the walls pulsing with the Dominion's collective anxiety. "Explain it again," demanded the Archon, his voice a blade of bioluminescent fury. "How does a species with such primitive origins defy the greatest military power in the galaxy?" Xerwind exhaled, his spines flexing in resignation. "Because they do not fight for conquest," he said. "They fight for each other." The silence that followed was heavier than the void itself. Years later, when the first human envoys finally stepped onto Varian soil, they were met not with hostility, but with something far more unsettling. The galaxy had learned. It was not human weapons that made them terrifying. It was their mercy. And in the end, that was the revelation that changed everything. Final line: the galaxy feared humans not for how they killed, but for how they didn't. Word count, Faye, on target continuity notes, resolves the Varian retreat from Section Faye, shows the ripple effect of human mercy across the galaxy, reinforces the psychological impact of restraint as a weapon, ends with the thematic conclusion: fear born from respect, key emotional beats, the humiliation of being spared as a tactical choice, the slow realization across alien factions, the final, chilling understanding of human nature. Let me know if you'd like any refinements. Additional section continuation. The Varian High Council convened in silence, their chamber lit only by the flickering emerald glow of their bioluminescent data streams. The war was over. The humans had won, not by glassing their worlds, not by burning their fleets from the sky, but by letting them go. High Captain Zorth stood before them, his spines dulled in submission. The others waited for his report, their tendrils twitching in unease. He had expected fury, demands for retribution. Instead, the air was thick with something far worse. "We underestimated them," Zorth admitted, his voice hollow. "Not their weapons, them." The Council's eldest, a wizened Xerion whose bark, like hide, bore the scars of a dozen wars, pulsed a slow, reluctant acknowledgement. "They could have destroyed us. They chose not to." A younger officer hissed, her frills flaring. "A weakness. We should strike now before they—" "Fool," the elder cut her off, his voice like rustling leaves. "You still do not understand. They let us see their mercy. That was the lesson. Zorth clenched his claws. The humans had not just spared them. They had engineered their retreat, herded them like prey into the open, made sure every Varian ship recorded the moment their guns did not fire. The entire galaxy had watched, and now the whispers spread. The Krellis collective, who had once glassed entire species for defiance, now hesitated at the edge of human space. The Ghoul Dominion, who fed on conquered worlds, had withdrawn their raiders, not out of fear of annihilation, but fear of forgiveness, because the humans had proven something far more terrifying than destruction. They had proven they could win without it, and that changed everything. Word count. Fey, total now Fey, deepens the political aftermath, shows ripple effects across other alien factions, reinforces the psychological warfare of mercy, ends on a haunting note of galactic shift key additions, Varian councils humiliation and reluctant realization, other alien empires reacting to human restraint. The true victory being a change in galactic warfare itself. Let me know if you'd like any refinements to the tone or pacing.